Good evening, fantasy football fans. If you're coming over from our earlier show over on the Chop Shop, welcome to Getting Defensive. If you're just joining us for all the IDP goodness, welcome also. I am your host, Jeff DiMatteo, founder of GridironRatings.com, and with me tonight is the one and only IDP Iggy. You've probably seen him on Twitter. He's a general beacon of positivity, light, and fun. Everywhere you go, you see him, building people up. Absolutely love it. And he's spouting off some really great IDP takes, watches a lot of film. Iggy, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for having me. Got all my Green Bay gear up. You got to stay true during the hard times and the good. But I'm really stoked to be here. And like I said, after I went back and saw some of what you were doing in San Francisco, so you're right there. We got to suffer through it. Once I saw some of the stuff you were doing, I was just thrilled to be here and suck up some of your knowledge as well, man. That's what it's all about, sharing and progressing the defensive side of the ball. Because guess what? It's 33% of the game. Let's say. It has to be at least that. So
at least, right? Yeah, 3 phases, you got to win them all. And if you're playing fantasy, you're only playing half the game if you're not playing IDP. So, now you're with King Fantasy Sports. Is that right?
yeah, I'm affiliated with King Fantasy Sports. My second year there. I'm really happy to be with those guys in the UK. Like I said, my following just went there, and I love it. That's a very passionate football group, and King Fantasy Sports, Richard, he has a lot going on. So I'm thankful to be there. You can find all my IDP takes there. I do all the IDP more or less for them there, and every week I got start sits, waiver pickups, and so forth. So
awesome. So would it be fair to call Richard King Richard? Like, does he make people do that around the office?
yeah, King Richard. Yeah, I've said it a few times in the messages, and he didn't pick up, or he didn't respond to the humor. I'm sure he's heard it quite a few times growing up. I thought it was ironic too.
I enjoy the little things. I'm all about a bad joke. It's where I live. Uh, so you mentioned start sits and IDP content and all that kind of stuff. Like, how did you get into IDP for those that haven't met you before, haven't heard you before? Like, give us kind of the rundown on who you are, what you're all about.
Yeah, so my love of football, my earliest memories are football. Like I remember Pat Summerall and John Madden. I remember Joe Theismann up in the booth. I can remember Frank Gifford up there. So I'm born in the '80s, but those early memories are still engraved with me. And I played for 11 years. I played internationally, and then I was just at college in this small little ghetto apartment that they leveled about a year after I was living there. My neighbor talked me into it. He's like, "Hey, why don't you play some fantasy with us?" He's like, "You love football, you'll love fantasy." And I was like, "Nah, I don't know, man. I'm trying to pass. I'm trying to do good." He's like, "Don't worry." He's like, "You won't be spending any time doing that. You're gonna spend all your time doing this." And I'm so glad Mark did that. And I played in the league 1 year with him. That was 13 years ago. Now, me being me, I was like, I can do this better. And I put IDPs in the league right then and there. And, I got all those guys to join the league. I was like, I'll commission it. I'll do all that. And I've enjoyed being a commissioner. And that's what led me to the charity league. But IDP, 12 years, playing at least 3 starters. I bumped it up to 6 about 2 or 3 years into it with 16 teams. So I've been playing with some pretty deep IDP leagues for a while. And it's led to my charity league, which, thankful goodness, Fantasy Football Sevens. I'm really proud of it. And it's we just donated $1,600 on the first live show Sunday to 2 foundations. We split it up, one in the UK, one in the USA. And if you've never played, it's a chance for a lot of people to play IDP in a format. I feel like that balances it out. Team defense gets just as much as quarterbacks, and IDPs get just as much as running backs and wide receivers. So I think after 12 years, I'm really proud of my formula of nailing down IDPs and tweaking it and getting it to where it makes sense because you have to have relative worth. I mean, the NFL makes sure there's relative worth. There's 11 versus 11. They're pretty staggered in the same way. And I think that, fantasy football deserves to have that aspect of it as well.
Absolutely. No, that's great, man. And make sure, when we get out of here, shoot me a DM with the link to the charitable foundation too. Something I try to do for all the folks that come on the show with us is I try to make donations to all of their charities too. Just a way to kind of show that appreciation back because we're, really thrilled to have you on. And I want to make sure that, we're always trying to keep that up, right? Keep the positivity rolling. And we'd like to be involved in all the charities wherever we can. So that's great.
Absolutely, my man. I'll shoot that over, no doubt.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, with that, we should probably start getting into some topics here. Folks probably want to hear about some IDP stuff. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly, man, week 1. Like, we had some good stuff. We had some bad stuff. Something I thought was pretty good was the Bills' defensive front. What did you think about that when you were watching them take on the mighty Rams?
It's good. Like I said, I'm a tape guy like you. I like to analyze things with the firsthand kind of point of view. And the great thing about watching a game live is, you get that content then, there, and it's accurate. You get all the penalties that take away the great plays and so forth. And they just kept it on a rotation. Those people were fresh. I think Von Miller only had 38 snaps. Like I said, I'm not a big snap guy, but he was able to produce 2 sacks, 4 tackles with those 38 snaps because he was fresh. Phillips was able to just clog that line. He was getting double teamed and still shedding people off of him because he was able to fill that A gap or that B gap when needed. Oliver, even though he kind of tweaked his ankle at first, he came out just firing. They were just fresh. That was their philosophy. Like, we got depth on this front line. Let's keep it fresh. Let's get the right personnel in and the right situation. And it looks like they saw some weaknesses. They prepared for them to be out of shape. They said, we're going to be in better shape than they are because the offensive linemen don't really rotate. It's not really how it works for the most part in the NFL. So they just beat them with just complete scheme and freshness. And I thought it was amazing. Micah Hyde was shading over. That's another thing I noticed in the back personnel. They had Hyde and Poyer kind of shading, helping those corners. Notre Davius White, when White's there, you don't have to worry about it. It's not even a second thought for them. But with this, I noticed they played a lot of too high. They played a lot of too deep. They shaded it over. And that's all credit to Leslie Frazier. I'm really big into coordinators, because they're who the staff is trusting to coordinate whatever side of the ball it is. And I think it was an excellent game plan that they executed.
Yeah, 100%. And, I noticed the safeties thing too. And I'm a real big fan of things like pressure rate. I think it's always a good predictor of future performance, especially sacks. And the Bills collectively, okay, they were able to generate pressure on a minimum 27 snaps out of the 60 snaps that the Rams had on offense. So 45%, that's ridiculous. So a number like in the 20s, 25, 27, that's elite. They're at 45. That was bonkers. And it got to certain points where they were only bringing 4. They weren't getting cute. There was no stunts, twists. They weren't running any games. There was no blitzing. It was just, we're going to line up our 4 on your 5, and we are going to beat you to the quarterback. And it was rough. The Rams' offensive line, to me, it seems like a target right now. If I'm looking for guys to stream, I want a pass rusher going against the Rams.
Absolutely.
I mean, Joseph Noteboom out there, the new left tackle, he looked out of his depth, and it didn't matter who was in front of him. They had Von Miller in front of him. To your point, you brought up Von and his snaps. You had Boogie Basham beat him a couple of times. You had Gregory Russo beat him. It's like the guys just took, you might as well call Noteboom the pinata because these guys took turns beating him to death.
They did. They all had a turn. Candy's coming everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, here, I'll fire off a couple stats for you because obviously we watched the film, but here's something to corroborate it. So Jordan Phillips, okay, he had the most snaps, and I'm not worried about the snaps, but guy had 2 sacks, a QB hit, and 2 hurries. Mm-hmm. That's a really good stat line for a guy who's playing inside. You had Boogie Basham, QB hit, couple hurries. He had, so he was in the backfield. Von Miller, couple sacks, QB hit. Daquan, sack, QB hit. AJ Epinesa, 2 sacks, QB hit, hurry. Like Ed Oliver, limited snaps, sack, hit. These guys obliterated the Rams front. And now we're looking at Atlanta playing the Rams. And I know Atlanta is a bad football team, right? I think we can all agree. Despite what we saw against the Saints, I don't know if they're that good. Week 1 kind of hides a lot of stuff. How do we feel about Grady Jarrett as an IDL playing against this very, very generous offensive line?
Well, I do believe, like you pointed out with Phillips and Oliver, I think they even lined up AJ some into like the 5 gap and had him come into the guard. It looks like there's pressure as well, not just at the tackle, but as well in the interior. And older quarterbacks do not enjoy pressure up the middle. They don't have the ability to scramble, so they trust that pocket. Grady Jarrett, he still gets double teamed. He still gets schemed to, to be taken care of in that defense. But I mean, it's worth the flyer because most people aren't drafting Grady Jarrett, or if they did draft him, they probably dropped him because they see all this other like stat kind of bump on week 1 out there. So I think there's a great potential because Atlanta, I haven't looked at the game film, but they kept Winston in check for a little bit, and until they started getting the running game going kind of with Taysom Hill because Kamara was playing hurt. But I think it's an excellent play because that Rams, 7 sacks. How many interceptions did Matthew Stafford have? 3?
2 or 3, yeah, something like that. I think it was 3.
Yeah, 2. I mean, it's just like I think that, there's an opportunity there for Atlanta because I do think their offense is a little better than people are are giving it credit for, which helps the defense. If they can generate and play with a positive game script, it didn't really help them against the Saints per se, but maybe it'll help them against a worse offensive line, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I try to get into a little bit of the waiver stuff, but really, I try to find those little gems, right? And if you're playing in a shallow league or if you're playing IDL specific and someone passed on Grady Jarrett for age, that might be a guy you go get. Maybe take a look at the other Atlanta pass rushers. Arnold Ebiketie is a guy that comes to mind where he was probably drafted in a dynasty league, but he's probably sitting in a redraft. Definitely worth taking a flyer on this week just against a really bad Rams O-line. But I'll tell you what, let's shoot past the Bills-Rams game. Unless we have any other notes on that. Anything else you want to add on that game?
I mean, yeah, just keep in mind, like people that had TJ Watt, they probably said on another edge rusher for a while. So keep these streamers in mind. Injuries are going to happen throughout the season. So that's all I wanted to add.
Sure, 100%. As a person who has TJ Watt rostered in more places than I care to admit, definitely looking for edge rushers this week. So how about the bad? The Eagles' whole unit allowed a ton of points. There was a lot going on here, allowing 35 to Detroit in week one. I think we can all agree we like DeAndre Swift and Hawkinson and, the sun god Amon-Ra St. Brown and some of these other guys in Detroit. But did we like them enough to think they were going to go out and hang 35 on the Eagles, in week one? I mean, granted, Detroit didn't win, but 35 points is no joke. Like, what was going on with that defense?
When I look back at the film, the Detroit Lions controlled the offensive line. Like, paused it a lot. I'll give it the snap, second. Who was controlling that line? Offensive line was being controlled, but they didn't really assist them in any way. And this put a lot of pressure on Edwards and Kaiser White to not only be like prepared for Swift, but be able to go cover flats, be able to cover curls. And it put a lot of pressure. They had decent numbers at the end of the day because of what they asked them to do. And I couldn't really pinpoint exactly what was going wrong other than they looked really tired. The Lions controlled a good deal of clock in the third quarter, particularly because the Eagles went out and scored right away. And I was like, man, they just look like they're not rotating much. They're expecting a lot of pressure from their front four, and it allowed Goff to kind of just sit back and do what he wanted to do to their zone. They were manning up. Once Amon started going off, they started manning him up with Maddox. I noticed that as well. But I couldn't really pinpoint it other than it kind of was like a prevent. We're tired. We got this good lead and we're going to try to hold. At one point, they had a 17-point lead in the second half. And I think they kind of took the pedal off, but it's kind of inexcusable because they're getting beat on some of these coverages, like by Jared Goff. Like he threw some very bad throws and then he threw some that were just like wide open and Chart getting available, Amon beating Maddox on man coverage and still getting open in the zone. But basically their front four was kind of controlled, in my opinion, a little bit by the Lions front five, and they didn't assist them that much.
Sure. And I mean, and this game was kind of bait, I think, to a point. The Detroit O-line is really underrated. That's a strong group up front. A lot of high draft capital dudes that are good pedigrees, big contracts up there. And, the Eagles, while very talented, they had to be challenged here, and they were. I would have liked to have seen a bit more out of the linebacking group. I'm a real big Nakobe Dean guy. I think by the end of the season, he'll end up being a starter for them. I'm kind of hoping the Eagles figure it out up front and they can create some space, let Nakobe Dean just go out there and run around and hit people. Because if they're going to sit down in quarters and they're going to be in, basically a nickel for most of the game and play quarters, and they're going to let Nakobe Dean run around the middle of the field, I think that'd be a great thing for their defense. But I'm not crazy about any of these guys. I really like Hassan Reddick potentially as a guy, just because, Javon Hargrave and you got, Fletcher Cox up front. Yeah.
I'm
Sweat.
Reddick too. Yeah. Went to college at Temple and Philly,
Yeah. And I'm just sitting here like, they should have had more pressure, but Detroit's O-line is really good. If you have these guys, don't panic, I think is probably the message right now. And let's see kind of what they do over the next 2 weeks before we start trying to drop them and all that kind of stuff. They did lose Derek Barnett, ACL injury. He's done. And so that's his season. Yeah, that guy's had a rough go, but I really love him at Tennessee, all-time sack leader there. It's sad to see him go out like that. But you know what? This creates more snap opportunity for guys like, Josh Sweat. And I think Sweat's one of those underrated guys that's hyper athletic, right? Yeah, is there anybody else in that defense that you like moving forward that might be available in some leagues right now?
If Epps is available, go get him, because he had on the film, I was like, Epps. It's just all in my notes right here. It's circle. I was like, where's Epps? And I was going back. I was like, he is everywhere around the ball. Marcus Epps, that is. Yeah, so if you can go get him, I don't know if he's available. He could be as a flyer in some leagues where you got to start, 2 DBs or something, so forth. So take a look at that. I'm with you on Hassan Reddick. I think he may have to turn it on, but they only generated 1 sack collectively over 2 half a sacks, and one of those was Jared Goff mishandled the snap, and that's how the whole reason they got it. So I don't know. Like I said, they didn't assist those guys much, and I don't know why we didn't see Dean Moore. But it's like it's the opposite route. We saw success with Buffalo. Philly tried a different route, and they almost paid the price for it. They didn't have such a really if Bradbury's interception doesn't go back for a pick six, and that's something from a stat perspective. If somebody only looks at stats, they're going to see that and be like, oh man, woo-doo. Really what happened is Hawkinson was supposed to cut out, and that's where Goff threw it. But Kaiser, being the great DB converted linebacker he was watching Goff he wasn't even worried about Hawkinson. He was watching Goff, and Goff threw it. He stuck that hand out with that great read, and positioning, zone, all those things matter. Flow into the football, and then they capitalize. But if they don't make that play, I think the second half is much different because they were content to go to quarters or prevent or cloud or whatever you want to say. They were content manning up on their best receiver, who I guess they assumed was Amon-Ra, and then sitting back and letting the front four trying to generate pressure, which didn't happen. 1 sack a game, that's ridiculous. It's the complete opposite result as far as from a defensive perspective as what the Bills did.
Sure. So I think moving forward, if we're seeing our pass rushers playing against Detroit, probably going to temper expectations a little bit. If you have IDLs and you're in a position where you're in that kind of a league, probably temper those expectations along the front. I'm with you, though. I saw the Bradbury pick. That was a tip ball, play. So if you're getting 6 points on an interception in your league and you're like, oh, Bradbury's amazing. Somebody else wants to buy those points and chase that, sell them right now, because you're probably not getting them next week. If you have Eagle linebackers, this is probably going to be a little bit of a disaster most of the year. It's going to be up and down. Epps is making a bunch of plays. I got to give some credit where credit's due. Our former host, the IDP tipster Gary Van Dyke, he was all over Epps back in the spring, and I was like, who? What are you talking about? And so I got to give a little bit of credit where it's due there. But
he's a good dude. Yeah, he's got it figured out.
Absolutely, and he had that one called and pegged. But anyway, this Eagles defense, I feel like I don't love any of these guys 10 weeks from now. Is there a guy that stands out to you, whereas we're starting to look at fantasy playoff runs, where you're like, that's a guy I want on my roster? And I don't see that guy outside of maybe Epps, if you're thinking it's Epps. But
I mean, I'm still hoping for Reddit because I wrote him as a breakout candidate, so maybe he can generate pressure against some, Cowboys, Giants, Washington. Wentz was getting got to, so there's potential there just within the division. So if I'm gonna, not necessarily if you're in a shallow bench, maybe not, but if you're kind of where you have to hang on to certain guys, I would hang on to Reddick because he also has a dual designation on sleeper, which is going to help week 7, week 14, week 9, these major bye weeks.
Bingo.
They have a week 7 bye, so it's not going to help week 7, but it'll help us other weeks.
Yeah. Well, let's hit one more team. We'll call this one the ugly. The Arizona Cardinals. I mean, a lot of folks have this pegged as a high over-under game where it should have been a shootout, fantasy bonanza, they were telling me. It was pretty one-sided. The Chiefs lit them up. Cardinals allowed 44 points. I think the big thing that we need to be taken away from this, though, is Isaiah Simmons plays 61 snaps, and they were split nearly evenly between the slot and the box. So meaning, only about 30-something snaps was this guy in a position to actually pile up tackles. Otherwise, he was in coverage. And for quite a bit of it, it was on Travis Kelce. And that's not the guy I want my linebacker covering, because there's more of a chance of Kelce getting a touchdown than a linebacker getting a tackle. The only guy that was worse than Simmons in coverage was Nick Vigil. Simmons allowed 3 for 3 for 53 yards and a touchdown when targeted. Nick Vigil was the only guy worse, 5 for 5, 76 yards and a touchdown. That's a bad-looking defense. It's a bad-looking group. I really want Simmons to do well. I expect him to be kind of the second highest scoring backer on this team behind Zaven Collins. But what say you? I know you're another Simmons truther. I think we can commiserate on this one. We both feel a little terrible about it.
Yeah, I'm saying not panic. I mean, he's out there. I'm not the biggest snap count guy either. But he's out there, and it's gonna, he's not gonna be playing against Kelsey every week. If they're gonna use him against tight ends, you got Everett, you got Waller, you have a couple other tight ends that might be coming. But I just think that they have faith in him. I just don't know what Vance Joseph is doing with him, and I like Vance Joseph as a coordinator, but he's not utilizing this Arizona team well. They didn't generate any pressure. That's where it all starts for me. I was big on Marcus Golden. He's hurt. How much was he playing through some pain? I don't know. I always credit those guys for probably doing a little more than what meets the eye. But Zach Allen's got to turn on. I mean, their safeties are saving them. When your safeties are your leading tacklers, and Thompson and Baker are the ones carrying you through, that's not good. But not every week's going to be Mahomes either. I'm having faith in Simmons. I'm having faith in Collins. Collins, if he's going to be in the middle of the field, anything that they funnel to the middle is going to go his way 100% of the time. Like you said, I mean, they seem to be trying to figure out what they're trying to do with that hybrid flex position on tight ends and elite slot players. And it's not an easy thing to figure out, but they're going to have to generate some pressure to help everybody across the linebackers, the DBs. Somebody's going to have to step up on that defensive line to get them some help.
Absolutely. Well, and Golden was out this week, right? He was banged up. And so, I see him as kind of a double-digit sack guy, kind of like a 10-sack dude. I don't see much of a ceiling beyond that. But especially without any kind of elite rusher on the other side. I mean, Cameron Thomas is the guy, but he's a third-round draft pick rookie at San Diego State's a smaller school, like well-thought-of prospect. But let's be clear, he's not exactly clearing the road for him. Something's got to give. So I'm not willing to sell Simmons, but they have the Raiders this week. So if he's got to cover Waller this week, and he's got another 60-snap game, and he's got 30 snaps in the box and 30 in coverage, the fantasy points might not be there. And if they're not, I think I'm going to go try and buy him. I'm going to probably go hit up the Simmons owner, and I'm going to see if I can pick the guy up on the cheap. And then later in the year, when I've got these situations where I don't have to worry about, an elite tight end where this guy's got to cover him, maybe the Cardinals, kind of decide to change course, and they say, hey, look, we're going to get you off coverage. We're going to let you actually just run around, do some run and hit. That's how he and Collins could really do some damage. But I'm willing to buy him cheap if I can get him after week 2. And so don't panic. It's only been a week. Week 1, week 2. If you watched the Chop Shop before this, we told you, hey, look, it's week 1 is a glorified preseason game. Okay. Do not panic. Week 2, do not panic. Week 3, we start really hard looking at our roster and saying, okay, look, we have 8 quarters of football content now. Let's see what it really looks like. Anything else you want to throw down on the Cardinals?
Yeah, just, like you said, don't panic. Their safeties are great. Hopefully J.J. Watt can come in and make some kind of effect as well for them. I don't know. He's never healthy. That's a big part of it. But, they are in the NFC West. I think the Raiders are going to run a lot. He's running Bolden. He's running White. They brought in Jacobs after that. He was much more efficient. So I don't know what their plan is to do strictly with that offense. But, yeah, don't panic. I think week 2 is like the most, people make so many mistakes in week 2. It's like one of the worst betting weeks from a betting perspective in the country because everybody takes everything for truth in week 1. So don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Pump the brakes. It'll be okay. Things will level out. We're going to find out who the next guys are, in the next couple of weeks here. So yeah, don't panic. I think we're on the same sheet of music there. I'll tell you what, we've got about, where are we at here? We're almost halfway through. Let's hit some waiver targets. I see some guys out here talking about Pete Werner and some of these guys from New Orleans. I don't know that I'm running that. I'm falling over myself to get Pete Werner against Tampa Bay. There's just that the points they allow to the position just don't seem like they're there. I like the guy. He's probably usable in a deeper league, but if you're playing 3 to 6 IDPs, no, he's probably not there. What do you think about Pete Werner?
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of right there where you are. Exactly. I see some people say that too. And I think there's better options, I mean, if you're trying to go deep, I think Tranquil, I think Diablo Divine, or not Diablo, but Divine, I think is also available probably just as well. And if you think that Arizona is going to run a high tempo offense, then you get to look at that right off the bat with much more higher snap count. Whether it's from a negative play script or a positive, really, I think that's the advantage of playing defense against Arizona. If Kruger Hill is available, go get him. That Houston game, I thought it was going to be Kirksey all over the place. Kruger Hill is everywhere, man. He is just like there's no he doesn't have the stamina is like an all-time two-way player. He's there everywhere. It's unreal kind of watching him on film, actually.
Camo Grugier-Hill's a great one. I think let's hold on him for a second. So this is the guy that I loved in Philadelphia. I love the athleticism, really underrated athlete, super fast guy who has great coverage chops. Like he doesn't have to come off the field. And that was the big thing where everyone was talking about, Christian Harris out of Alabama. They're talking about Kirksey and all this stuff. I was actually kind of stuck on Hill because I was like, well, Kirksey's not really a coverage guy like Hill is. And Harris, we saw the exact same player for 3 years at Alabama. He didn't improve at all. How's he really going to impact the defense at the NFL level? So to me, it kind of seemed like that was a natural fit. But my question was, what does the actual tackle opportunity look like? Are they bad? Yes. But are they competent enough on offense to keep it close where there's really just having teams run it down their throat at the end? I don't know. I think that offense is competent enough. I think that tackle opportunity gets capped a little bit. Do you think as the season kind of wears on, we're going to start to see more rotation with Harris and we're going to start to see a little bit more of that, the kind of ebbs and flows where 1 week it's Kirksey, 1 week it's Grugier-Hill, 1 week it's Harris? Or do you think this is Grugier-Hill's defense and that's it?
Man, it's weird because he's a captain, and I like I said, I think that I put more importance into that than others because I trust that to me that means that the coordinator and the team has all the respect and confidence in them. And him and Kirksey dropped back a lot, whereas Grugier-Hill would go from didn't really matter the flat side. He would go cover either flat, cover either curl. He was just flying to the football, and I think Harris can work his way in, but it's going to be hard with those two because Kirksey's he calls the defense. He called a couple audibles with Matt Ryan. I was surprised to see that as well. Like, he was almost like watching Manning and like Urlacher or something. It was really bizarre kind of watching that game. But I guess if you play 5 full quarters, you kind of figure out what they're doing. I do think Grugier-Hill's the guy. I mean, Hughes was able to get to Matt Ryan on against a good offensive line. Matt Ryan's always kind of held the ball long. He likes to throw the deeper ball. So that could be attributed some of that to Hughes as well. But if you can, I think Grugier-Hill's a go-get. He was a tiered rank for me. He was on my 4th-tier linebacker, putting him in like a linebacker 2 in most of the formats I play in. But I wasn't expecting what I saw on film because I saw it and I kind of let some people kind of like, they're talking bad about him. I was like, I see good things potential in him. But once I saw Kirksey got like the cream dot, I was like, maybe Lovie Smith is putting more faith in Kirksey. I think he's putting equal potential in both of them. I mean, Lovie Smith has produced some great Hall of Fame linebackers. And I think Grugier-Hill's in the right scheme and he's with the right coach. And they're going to just let him fly to the football everywhere he goes. He's being used how I thought Simmons would be used. Let's say it that way.
For sure. I actually thought Nakobe Dean was going to end up in a place like Houston, especially when he slid out of the first round. Because Dean looks so much to me like another version of Derek Brooks with the way he runs and hits and he can cover and play the run. He does a little bit of everything. But I'll tell you, let's move on to a couple more. So a guy that stood out to me, well, a couple guys that were definitely later drafted, kind of left for dead in a lot of fantasy spaces. New England Patriots, Juwan Bentley. This guy had 7 tackles and a sack this week, and he played well last year. This guy that had about 100 tackles last year. And, we're seeing the reemergence again, at least until he gets hurt, of Miles Jack. 11 tackles in week 1.
Yeah, no, both Bentley, as I kind of was high on him, and I kind of forgot about him, honestly, in the Patriots defense. And then I got to give a shout out to Mace out there. He's in the league as well. He said something about what do you guys think about Bentley? I went back and looked at it, and he had that performance. And once again, it's like a rotation. I don't think his snap count was that high, if I remember correctly. Keeping him fresh, particularly down there in Miami where it's really muggy. And I think there's potential there because I'm not sure that offense is going to be able to sustain drives. I mean, Ty Montgomery's out for at least 4 weeks on the PUP. He's their only scorer. He caught majority of their passes out of the backfield. Mac Jones looked a little confused to me at times. Maybe that's credit to the Dolphins defense. But I do think Bentley is absolutely worth it. And Miles Jack was a tier 2 linebacker for me already. I just trust everything that they do in that defense. I mean, he has so many playmakers around him. All he has to do is focus on his job. He doesn't have to be like he was in Jacksonville and covering, bad edge pressure and his defensive tackles getting blown back 2 yards in front of him. And, he's having to do stuff like that. I think he has a potential to have an excellent year. They let go of Joe Sherbert with absolute confidence when they made this transaction. And I think he's the real deal. I've always kind of thought he's really good at what he does.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to see how few rosters Miles Jack was on. I think he was drawing dead in sleeper, like 0%. And now to clarify that, 5%'s the cap. Like you see an IDP player at 5%, that's the same thing as 100% rostered. Because they incorporate the offense only and the IDP leagues together, so the ownership number's a little wonky. But 5% is the ceiling. 0, you're basically drawing dead. Hey, Miles Jack's probably available in your league if you're playing more than, say, 6 starters. Go take a look at that guy. He and Devin Bush are super fast. This is a very highly touted prospect when he came out. To your point, played in a scheme in Jacksonville where he was asked to do everything. He put up an elite season, then he got hurt, and then he was in and out of the lineup, and everything around him was anarchy. He goes to Pittsburgh, and now it seems like you got a pretty tough front in front of you, even without TJ Watt. We'll have to address the 500-pound gorilla in the room, right?
Yeah.
TJ Watt's out of the lineup for 8 weeks at least. They haven't disclosed. They say it's not season ending, but as a torn pec, like, come on, it's damn well season's over. I mean, it's pretty tough to come back from one of those.
Especially when you got to do like that defensive end move where you got to like throw that tackle. Like,
yeah, 100%. And I'm just like, no, Watt's probably done. But you got Alex Highsmith out there. He's a competent edge rusher. That's a guy you can go add if he's out there and available in your league. Miles Jack is a guy that I like quite a bit. Devin Bush is probably rostered, but he's still useful. Someone's probably going to cut him because he didn't get it done in week 1. Bush and Jack are probably the 2 fastest sets of linebackers in the NFL. Like, we just take the 2 guys together, fastest tandem, it's those 2 guys. They don't know where they're supposed to be half the time. I think that's safe to say. But they get there really fast. And so they're likely to run into some ball carriers here and there, like we saw with Jack. So definitely some guys to look at and keep an eye on. Let's see. Who else do we need to take a look at? If you're
I do. I mean, I got Tranquil. He didn't have the greatest game, but I do think he has potential for some really deep leagues. Quay Walker, I'm a Packers fan. He was all over the field trying to cover a lot of places. He was in the wrong spot a couple times. He definitely got beat by some good moves, but that allows for great tackle opportunity. When you get beat and you're getting targeted, and Devondre Campbell looked great, so I think they're going to keep targeting whoever Walker might be manned up on. We talked about Gruber Hill. Cody Barton looked great Monday night. I don't know. He's a special teams guy, but I don't know if they're going to keep. 10 tackles, my Lord, and 1 sack. He looked great out there Monday. I was very angry watching him tackle several Broncos players I like. And then I can't ever say his name correct, but Alex Anzalone.
Alex Anzalone.
Anzalone, man.
As a fellow Guido, I get it. I'm right there.
No, it was difficult for me, but he is around the ball. He's always a step behind, which is allowing him to get a lot of tackles, man. But he is around the ball. When they went in the second half, more with Rodrigo and him, it is definitely like they controlled the line of scrimmage, which allowed them to free up. Like the rushing totals went down quite a bit per carry for the Philadelphia Eagles in that second half. I don't have the stats, just watching the film. I was like, man, once they brought those 2 guys together, there's just this up-tempo-ness about him. So he's probably rostered in a lot of leagues, but for some shallow leagues where you only have to start 2 streamers or something like that, take a look because they're going to spend a lot of time on defense. And as good as Charles Harris is and some of those other guys on the line, he's still covering quite a bit of sideline to sideline coverage.
I can dig it. Here's a guy I don't expect to be available unless you're playing really shallow, say like 3 to 4 starters on IDP. But what about like Marcus Davenport as a DL? He's actually not rostered in as many places as I thought he would be, but the Saints are great at locking up Tom Brady. They shut down Mike Evans with regularity. Lattimore does a great job on the perimeter there. Brady's got a banged up O-line. And I think if you get Davenport isolated on a tackle, that's a bad day for Tom Brady. He's going to be running for his life a little bit. How do you feel about Davenport this week?
Oh, I love him, man. I've loved him since UTSA. He was, one of my breakout candidates I wrote as well on my Patreon. All my articles are free on Patreon that I write at least. And he's one of my initial breakout character because Cameron Jordan's aging, but he still garnishes a lot of attention from the offensive coordinators, and it allows a lot of one-on-one opportunities with a guy that's kind of like a freak of nature when you look at his body and his strength and how quick he is. He gets hurt. That's why people forgot about him. He's been hurt the past 2 years, but his numbers prior to going out last year were great. Like you said, there's still playmakers behind him. I think Marcus May is disrespected a little bit as well. And I just think, yeah, Davenport against a kind of a bad offensive line there is, especially if you're in a big sack league or in a league where you have to rotate players where you can only play them once or something like that. Yeah, go take a look at Davenport. I've been high on him. I have him rostered in 2 of my leagues, so I'm definitely right there with him. I have Kwity Paye also as a defensive lineman. Maybe people use a name that snuck by. He had a great year last year. He plays right beside DeForest Buckner. Bobby O looks good behind him. There's a lot of depth behind him, so he can just worry about going full on rushing, and he doesn't really have to worry about much else. And it showed. He got 2 sacks and 7 tackles, on 55 snaps for those that like that too. So I think Pay's another good name to keep in mind for a defensive lineman if you want to get up there. And I got Nwasu too, but.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll come back to Owasu in a second, but Kwity Paye, I love that. And I love DeForest Buckner. And if you're playing in an IDL league, the guy that might be sitting there is another Colts D lineman. This D line is no joke, but give me Grover Stewart. That was a guy that played really well against Houston, really acquitted himself in a strong way. He was able to take on a couple double teams. He was able to man the 1 and 2 gap wherever he was asked. When he was lined up head over the guard, he was in the backfield. If you allowed him to 2 gap and pick his slot and go, he was there and he was making plays in the backfield. And so like when Kwity Paye had his first sack, I think Grover Stewart was right there. He didn't make the play with him, but he was right in the vicinity. And then he had a couple plays where he was able to track, plays down out to the numbers. When you've got an interior defensive lineman tracking plays down to the numbers laterally, you're talking about 20 yards worth of tracking there. That dude's an athlete. Guess what? He can run. And that's terrifying. So if you need to find some points, 300 pounds, hauling ass, like let's, hey, that's something, right? These are the kinds of guys where these are hidden points. Let's find those hidden points now, use them later. Grover Stewart's a guy you can stash on your bench for a little bit. He's probably not going to cost you any fab. You're talking about a $0 entry here, and you'll probably get him. Unless you're in one of those crazy deep IDL leagues where you're starting like 2 or 4 IDLs. He's probably already rostered. You're probably starting 27 IDP players at that point. But you mentioned Uchenna Nwasu from Seattle. That's another player I like a lot. I liked him coming out of USC. High motor dude. He got to wear the infamous. I think he was one of the 42s there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he had. And so for those of you that are uninitiated at USC, the 42 is a big deal. You've got to earn it. There's certain numbers at USC you have to earn the number to be able to use it and play. I think it's 55 and 42 for USC. And he was one of those guys. He was a captain, comes off the edge hard, really lightning quick first step. I don't love his upper body strength. I don't think he's beaten a lot of tackles, even when isolated, but great speed rush technique, does a nice job coming back with a spin, good rip moves. He can get to the quarterback. Seattle's offense looked a whole hell of a lot better than I think we expected. This could be a shot for some cheap sacks here. So give me your take on Nwasu outside of what I've already, kind of spilled on the table here.
Yeah, that's what I kind of remember. I was like, man, who is this guy? I didn't really like who's, because that bright green jersey, it's hard to differentiate. And I saw it, I was like, high motor. He like another high stamina guy bringing it. And I noticed, like you said, he doesn't have great upper body strength. So he's not like bull rushing people. So when he's getting to the QB, there's a lot of momentum. That's how he was able to force a fumble. I mean, when he's getting to the ball carrier, he's, all he's got to do now is bring an arm or do something. And all that momentum of him coming so fast is going to generate more forced fumbles, and in case you aren't aware, as soon as the QB fumbles it, that's a sack, that's a tackle for loss. You get all these stats just from that fumble, so you get all those, and it's something that they're teaching because you can't hardly hit QBs anymore. And it's it's an underrated skill set because, like you said, like the bull rush, a lot of people have both. A lot of good edge pressures, they can bull rush you, then they set you up and they spin you, and then after you've been spun by them, they come back to the bull rush. Well, this guy, you know what you're getting. It's kind of like Max Crosby in a lot of ways. He's just going to bring that high intensity to him, and I think he's definitely available in most leagues out there. And like you said, Seattle, maybe they're going to be they're the only team in the NFC West that has a win. So, that could be saying something for a lot of people out there. If they think they're going to pay with any kind of positive game script. And I had to throw a little jab. I don't know.
It's a deep burn. It's a deep cut right in here. We play them this week. Hopefully we can, balance the ledger a little bit here and knock them down to 1-1.
Yeah, well, I think people are going to focus on Penny. People are going to focus on Diggs. I think Adams is probably already done for the year. I've never had faith in him playing 16 games, or he never has. He hasn't
Yeah.
in 3 years or so anyway.
The quad tendon injury, though, is bad. That's not a
Yeah.
good injury to get. That's probably the year. He's probably already done. And that's a shame because I actually had him pegged. If he could get to 14 games, he was going to be one of the leading tacklers at the position.
Oh,
But
he looked all over the place, but that's part of that intensity. Like bringing it back to TJ Watt, he didn't get hurt because like he grabbed somebody and they ripped him. He got hurt because of his momentum going over Burrow and Burrow being strong enough to like hold himself up. And TJ Watt just ripped his pec as soon as he like dove over him and tried to hold on. It was all his own momentum. And those guys are so strong, man. It's the same with Jamal Adams. He's like, if you can go back and look at that game, go back and look at the first half. He is flying to the football. He's hitting full big running backs. He's bringing the heat, and it's just something that goes with it, unfortunately. But Diggs is going to have to step it up. He's going to have to become a focal point now. Jones as well, I think, came in and subbed in. He was looking good as well out there, but it's going to become on Nwosu. It all starts in the front defensive line with me, and if he can step it up, he's going to help all those people behind him. And like I said, I don't think he's necessarily the focal point of the game plan. So there's good potential there to go get him and get some points.
Quandre Diggs can't be dropping any more picks. He dropped one last night, and I was like, oh, man. I hurt for him because I know, man, that ball, when it dropped right through his hands, he had to be like, dang it. What did I just do? But I'll tell you, let's hit a DB here that didn't drop an interception this week. 49ers safety, and this might be a homer pick, but Talanoa Hufanga for the 49ers, another USC product. I'm not a USC fan, for the record. 11 tackles and a pick against the Bears. This dude, you talk about a nose for the football, being all over the place. This dude is it. I've got him on taxi squads in almost all my dynasty leagues. I wish I would have brought him up this year, but it's fine. He'll be great next year too. Jimmy Ward is still out for the 49ers. This defense has been kind of longing for that other defensive weapon. We've had Fred Warner for a while. He's been the guy, right? We know what Nick Bosa is all about, but there had to be another guy in the back half of this defense that could help make plays, right? Every great defense has got the sack guy, and then you've got a couple tackle guys, right? This one needed another tackle guy, and I think it's Hufanga. This guy is all over the field once again. He doesn't offer great speed. Okay, this is a 4.6, 4.7-ish guy. He's not terribly fast. However, he's got a nose for the football. He's always around the ball. If you watch the 49ers play, you're going to see 29 always around the play every single time. Tackles happening, there he is.
I was going to say, I just feel like he was making plays in the playoff game against Green Bay that you guys won in Lambeau last year. I feel like he made a couple of big plays. I can't remember.
The blocked punt touchdown? That was him.
Yeah, that was him. Yeah, that's what, like you said, the knack for the football. I was like, yeah, I know that name from somewhere else too, and I'm trying to block it out. But no, he is amazing, man. I'm part of a group chat, and like 2 or 3 people right away, they're like, hey, what do you think about this Hufanga? I was like, man, I had him on the radar, but I didn't expect, first off, for the 49ers to like not dominate that game. So I wasn't expecting to see him, and go get him, go scoop him up. He's definitely somebody I've personally got a waiver in for him right now. It's not an auction bid, it's a waiver bid. So I'm hoping I get him with the focus on offense, but that should tell you where it's at. I think that I don't think he's going to be coming out of the lineup. Let me put it that way. Some people get an opportunity and they roll with it, and that's it from then on. And you could be looking at that as a potential. Yeah, he could be the star of the secondary. I mean, that's saying something. He could really be the star of one of the best defenses in the conference, if not the league. Go get him if he's available.
Here's a little nugget I'll throw at you. So the play where he got the interception, he was actually lined up in the box next to Fred Warner, and at the point where they're getting ready they're making their reads, Fields gets, I think he was in the gun, but he's making his reads. He turns, puts his back to the play, hightails it back to the deep safety spot. And then he managed to basically camouflaged himself in behind, I think it might have been Dre Greenlaw. And then when the pass is in the air, he just popped up out of nowhere, and just snatched the ball out of the sky. It was like a whack-a-mole that you never saw coming. He just popped up and just took the ball away. But it was awesome because you see a guy who he's lining up in the box. That's great for tackles. We're talking about defensive backs. And then he's still able to turn tail, get back into the secondary to make a play on the football. Passes defense still get you points in most leagues. Picks get you big points. This guy is like a a less athletic version of Troy Polamalu, and he's got the
Yep.
hair to go with it.
Yeah, that's what
So
somebody said in that chat. It's like Troy Polamalu 2.0. I was like, hold up now. We gotta hold up on those assumptions. But no, what I like about people like that is they kind of become point proof. Because the IDP community, I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but there's a lot of diversity in the point system and the point scale. So you can be like, you may not get any points for tackles hardly, or you don't get hardly any points for interceptions, or you get a lot of points for interceptions and a lot of points for passes defended. And I just either way, he's great. If you can get 10 tackles, it's going to be worth it in IDP league just about any way possible. But then an interception and passes defended, if they're like big, 4 or 5 points per pass defended and 6 per interception or something, he's going to be able to cover you in some games there because he's got the full range. Like you said, there's not too many safeties. It's going to keep making this hybrid role. That's where we're headed. But there's not too many there that can do that at an elite level. And you might be looking at one of them, pop out of nowhere, second-year guy. I think Kyle Shanahan is the best coach in the conference. So he can get the best out of all his players. And I've always thought that. So.
Yeah, I love him as an ad, but he's a guy you definitely want to target right now. The last guy I'll mention, and this isn't because he put up any stats, but I feel like he's going to grow into this role over the course of the next several weeks. Safety Nick Cross for the Colts.
Yeah.
If he's not rostered, the Colts, Gus Bradley, strong safety is always a valuable piece in fantasy. So he's not doing much now. He's struggling, it looks like, to kind of know where he's supposed to be. But I expect that to come with reps. He's going to get better. This is the kind of guy where I hate the term league winner, but he could be the kind of guy you get now, you stash him, and then by weeks 8, 9, 10, a little later in the year, he's starting to put it together. And now you start seeing, 8 tackles, 10 tackles, 8 tackles, 14 tackles. Here's an interception. Here's 2 forced fumbles. Like, you start seeing him put it all together. There's a young man, 20 years old, right? He's just a baby. But he hits like a hammer, and he's fast enough to make plays all over the field. And so definitely somebody else worth taking a look at.
Yeah, Cross, like I said, the guy, especially, he's going to have Kenny Moore. He's going to get Shaq Leonard back. He's going to have, when you have that much talent around you and you're talented, all you have to do is focus on your job. That's the beauty of having some depth. And Gus Bradley, guys, from Seattle to Jacksonville to the Raiders last year, his track record's amazing. You want guys on Gus Bradley's defenses.
Absolutely. Well, we're running pretty low on time here. I think we're going a little over. We generally try to keep things down to 45 minutes to an hour, so we know people have all kinds of other things they want to do besides listen to us. So with that, is there any other players, situations, anything else you want to plug or put in at this point?
I think Highsmith is worth grabbing at any format if he's available. Marcus Williams for the Ravens as well, somebody that he's a do-it-all. He's if he's available, go get him as well because Hamilton, I guess, isn't ready, but Marcus Williams is more than ready. So go take a look at him, and then Marcus May as well. Like I said, if he's available, go take a look at him as well.
Cool. I can dig it. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining us. I hope you had a chance to tune in before Sunday. If these guys are still sitting around your waiver wire for any reason after, Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, go snatch them up, keep them on your roster. There's production inbound. You can track down all Iggy's work. You can go find him over at kingfantasy.com?
Yeah, you can Fantasy Sports, and then on Twitter, I'm at IDP Iggy, and then, like I said, I have my own Patreon where I post all my stuff at Iggy's Fantasy and Betting.
Boom. Awesome. That's what I was looking for. I want to make sure we got the right place so we can go find your work. Iggy's fantastic. If you're not following him on Twitter, please do so. That handle is at IDP_Iggy. You got to be on top of this. Just a ton of IDP content, ton of IDP information. And you know what? It's all super positive stuff. So if you're tired of the same kind of people dragging you down on Twitter, you're not getting that here. With that, I wish you the best of luck this week. If you have questions, reach out to us at gridironratings.com. Click the like and subscribe button on this video. If there's anything else you need from us, reach out. I am your host, Jeff DiMatteo, signing off and wishing you a W in week 2. Take care, everybody. Oh, man, I got to hit a button and I missed the button.